But two, what do you need to do before you revise a job description? What does this person need to know? What's essential versus what's marginal? We could live without it, but it'd be nice if they could do it. I just hired a Spanish speaking clerk. I'm telling you that part was essential. When that spot becomes empty, that's essential skill for that spot because none of the rest of us have a clue. But what was essential? Less than if I were hiring somebody not in that spot, because that person does other things. So look at your stuff and look at, have you ever looked at do you look at your job descriptions? Never? That's the day you got hired? Good. I send mine to their staff every January. Our January meeting, we do job descriptions and office policies. And we review them and we talk about them. And does anything need to change? Does anything need to come out? Is there anything you guys hate? Those kind of things. So we have a big January, usually I make breakfast, casserole or taquitos or something. And those are the things we talk about at January staff meetings. Because I know I've worked with places where you saw your job description the day you got hired. You don't know if you ever saw it again. Like, I just know other duties as assigned is on there somewhere. It's the part I wait for. My daughter's an attorney and she's a prosecutor at a local city. And she called me one day because they were having her do records requests. And she's like, can they do that? I said, you remember that part about other duties as assigned on the end of the job description? They sure can. The city attorney, who is your boss, wants you to do open records requests. You're doing open records requests. So remember, we're all subject to that part. That's in every job description you're ever going to see. Number three, does anyone want to tell me how a supervisor determines the quality and skills a prospective employee should have for a particular job?
By breaking it down into the tasks. So figuring out what task, what competency meets which task.
Perfect. That's exactly, you break it down in little tasks. I would suggest that you talk to the people who are doing it and say, okay, break this down and tell me what you do and what is important for you to know how to do. You know, if you're in charge of this, do you have to be a multitasker or do you have to be a one-part focused person? If you're in charge of this, do you have to, I have one person who isn't the most personable, but her main task is not front window customer service. So, okay. So those couple things. All right. What should be in a job matrix? I did mine. It's on page 17 if you have the book with you.
Employer defined tasks that add value and that don't add value.
Those are the top two.
Employee included tasks that add value and that don't add value. So each one is their own box.
Right. It's like the first ones are employer said you do these things or you don't do these things. And the bottom is employees say these are a waste of time or these work. Like for employee defined, those are employer defined, those are critical. If I give you employer defined tasks that add value, those are the things I think are critical. Those have to be done to perform your job. But when I look at something else that people are doing to waste time, I'm like, you don't need to do that. That'd be on the right-hand side of the matrix. Where if they tell me, that's stupid, why are we doing this for busy work? It's on the employee defined, not adding any value. So look around your office and ask, honestly ask. That's the best way to find out. What are you guys doing that's total waste of time? When I first got here, I'm kind of like an efficiency crazy person. I don't do anything. It doesn't need to be done. They were doing some of the dumbest things. And I went down from 7 staff to 4 without replacing people because it was like, they were just spinning wheels trying to keep busy, I think. Like, no, we don't have to do that. That has no value whatsoever. And we did this exercise. Okay, what do we do that really needs to be done? And what are you guys doing just because somebody a year ago or 5 years ago told you had to do that? And it's just like, no, you don't. Like, we don't have files anymore or things like that. So we don't need those. We have a one piece of paper because my judge won't turn on the computer. One piece of paper that we run out of Tyler that just has the name, the case number, date of violation. So he can know what the person has when it's in front of him, but they don't have a file. And we wouldn't have that if he had turned on a computer, but he's 80 something and it's never gonna happen. So, what kind of questions should each applicant be asked? That's on page 19. First, general questions, right?
Tell me about yourself.
I have a couple favorite questions. My first one is, tell me what the word ethics means to you. It kills me because they just sit there going, oh, what does that mean? Or they get it confused with ethnic. That's that has happened a few times, so I'm like, okay. So that's those are some questions. Those are my stress questions. Tough, challenging questions. So you're asking general questions and then stress questions. Challenging questions is a better word. Make them think. You know, one of my other favorite questions is what do you do when the boss asks you to do something that you don't agree with?
We have that.
I hate when they tell me, well, I'm just gonna do it. Like, okay. That's what they think I wanna hear. That's not what I wanna hear. I wanna hear how you're gonna communicate and fight for your point and tell me that it really probably isn't the smartest way to do things. I don't want to hear, well, I'm gonna do it. I hear that a lot. Like, oh, bad answer. So if you ever get asked that, don't say I'll do it. So those are the kind of things. So things that make people think quickly and spontaneously. I don't like to give them a whole lot of time to think that over. There should be things like when you ask me what ethics means to me, it's going to come out instantly. And it should be different for everybody, but it's not something I have to think about. Like, I know the answer to that. Edie? Oh, your little light was on. I thought maybe we had a comment. Please jump in whenever.
Okay.
So those are the kind of things that does anybody have any cool questions or were asked a cool question once in a job description and went, wow, I never thought of asking that. I'm always looking. I always ask, what kind of person can't you stand and what do you have to do to get along with that person? That's a hard one. Pushes your buttons. I mean, what ticks you off? Tell me, because we might have one of those. And I might need to know how the two of you are going to work together. So
I kind of want to know, and I've only sat in on a couple of interviews, but like, what is their escape plan for when they hit that threshold with the defendants?
good for you.
Um,
And I
this
like
go-
the way you worded it, escape plan.
because we all have a threshold and some can take more than others. And we have warrant officers in our office. So mine is, I'm short, I'm 5'1", and we have really tall chairs. So when I'm saying ma'am or sir really aggressively and I get off of my chair, they know to come.
Yeah, good,
You know,
good.
most people don't think about it, but we're
Yeah.
gonna have that.
Oh, yeah, and talk a lot because of the nature of the job that you have to talk a lot about. What do you do when people really tick you off? Because they're gonna. And I tell them that, oh, no one's ever gonna make me mad. Well, good for you. You're in the wrong business. Because they are going to. They really, I mean, they're gonna. That's just all there is to it. They do that for a living. The important thing to remember here is you should ask everybody the same question. That keeps you legally protected. You should have a list of questions that everyone gets asked. There's follow-ups that might come that might be in the, well, tell me more about that, but everybody should get asked the central questions so that somebody can't say, well, the questions they asked me were harder than someone else's. Then you have your little grid that says, no, I asked everybody the same questions. So they're written down. I ask them the way I ask them. What should be included on an interview form that's used to assess an applicant's skills? Page 25.
So I have critical skills, job tasks, questions, and comments.
Perfect. Exactly. Include the criteria most useful to you, the salient points and room for notes, questions. As I was talking about earlier, please know that there are some things that somebody might bring up or you might ask a follow up that doesn't necessarily have to go on that piece of paper. I'm not gonna write down that so-and-so had purple nails that sparkled. I'm not- The glitter nails, I'm not getting written down, but I know that that's important to me. It might not be important to somebody else, but there, you know, people who tell you things that they shouldn't, I may write it down. Like if you honestly with the lady with the that needed the insurance, I did put only seek employment for health insurance. That's all I put, but I did put that so that I would remember if she ever threw a fit that why I didn't pick her. But I wasn't gonna put the whole thing about her psychotropic issues. Because one, that's not my business, and two, I don't want to run into HIPAA on my little interview forms. It's like, oh God, I'm gonna have to keep this interview form forever because it's HIPAA. We had a defendant that's a nurse argue with this the other day that we were violating her HIPAA rights. I'm trying to explain, because she could, something she wanted, open records and couldn't have it in. I said, ma'am, we don't have HIPAA. How do you not have HIPAA? We don't work in the medical field? She was so mad. She knew we should be following HIPAA guidelines. It's like, okay. You do that. You follow HIPAA. I'll follow HIPAA if you follow the Texas Judicial Code. Then we'll be even. Tell me some different interview styles.
Chatty, scripted, hidden agenda.
Yep. Here you go. What do you think chatty would be?
A lot of empty conversation outside of important, critical information you're trying to find out.
And
Well,
have
and
you-
it's a way to warm them up. So they overshare and they kind of
yes,
volunteer information.
it's good to start that way, but I think you have to remember you're down to answering some questions. Always start that way. We talk about the weather or whatever, you know how it is, but then you come down to kind of both scripted. I do a little bit of scripted also. Have you ever been in an interview, it was 100% scripted and you felt like you couldn't express yourself? Like, yeah, Courtney has.
We are scripted here for the most part.
Yeah, I want to be able to like expound on stuff. It's like, I've been in an interview one time, they were not going off script no matter what I wanted to say in between. It was like, next question. It's like, I was trying to tell you something. I mean, it was just, to me, it was vital, but they didn't seem to care because it like wasn't on the question. But it really was, but then you have your hidden agenda questions. Don't try to set people up. They use hidden questions that try to get you to say things you shouldn't say, or, and a little bit, if you're smart enough, if you're hit with a hidden agenda question, you know it's a hidden agenda question. And so then you're trying to figure out what to say. You're trying to give them what they want. So I try to avoid that, to avoid them having to try to figure out what answer I want to hear. I read a lot of leadership materials and there are books on how to answer interview questions. And I know who read those books. If you get that answer, man, it's like, wow, that's the perfect answer right out of the book. So that's not what I want. As we talked earlier about how our offices work, you really need, my whole focus on interviewing is somebody who meshes with everyone else, who can, and they're different. My staff is so different. You would just go, how the hell do those people get along? But I need somebody that's a fit. I need somebody that's gonna fill a cog that I need. I can teach anybody court. I don't care if you ever step foot in a court in your life, but I can teach you that. I can't teach you your main personality traits that we need in the office at the moment. I just hired a goofball. I'll love her to death. Goofball, goofball. When I hired her, my senior was like, she is going to drive us nuts. And now everyone loves her. She's smart, but just goofy. She's so goofy. It's like, we laugh at her a lot and that's okay. Cause like, she's the type of person that will laugh at herself. So it's like, phew, you're such a dang goofball. And then I hired a millennial because I was trying to stretch my skills. Bad answer. Yeah.
I am a millennial.
I know, you told me. Yeah,
I'm
I
gonna defend millennials.
hired a stereotypical person.
Yeah.
I hired a stereotype. I know you told me at level 3. It's like, wait a minute. Like, no, I hired a stereotype. And that's okay. On purpose. So, and then I have a very straight by the rules kind of person. You just try to mesh your department more than try to. Don't ever,
Diversified.
yeah, don't hire a clone. Don't. They'll drive you more nuts than anybody else. How many has a child that's like them? That's the kid that most gets on your nerves because it's really hard to raise yourself. So remember when you're hiring, it's the kid that's most like you that gets on your nerves the most. Remember that when you're hiring people, don't hire people like you. In general, what should a plan for conducting an interview include? Page 20. No, they're right there in a row.
Greeting the applicant and putting them at ease with small talk. Explaining what you hope to accomplish with the interview. Asking questions to draw out information about their critical skills and personality traits. Describe the job, answer questions, close the interview, and let them know what the next steps are.
Perfect. That's exactly the answer. That makes perfect sense. You open, you close, you do all that stuff in between. Allow them to ask questions. I've seen a lot of interviewers that don't. I do panel interviews around this area when they'll ask me to come in and help them find court personnel. I hate when they don't say, do you have any questions for us? Because that's so important, because they're sitting there dying to ask something and you didn't give them an opportunity to do so.
Well, that will tell you a lot about them, what type of questions they ask.
Yes, it will. And that's such a step that people just omit. So don't do that. Yeah, I don't like panel interviews, but I've been on a lot of them around here. If they need an administrator, they'll call and ask if I'll sit on a panel with people who know absolutely nothing about court. I don't know how much credence they give to my opinion, but they look like I got interviewed by the city manager, the director of finance, the city attorney, no court people. Well, Lord, y'all are intimidating the crap out of me. All right, speaking of intimidating the crap out of me, next question. How can an interviewer put an applicant at ease?
A quiet room, no interruptions, no phone calls, allocate time for the interviewer. It even said sit beside the applicant rather than opposite, to have that table in between, which we are actually doing. So I'm gonna bring that up for our
Yeah.
next interview. Maybe we can rearrange it and make it not as intimidating.
Yes, I always bring my chair out from around my desk. I don't sit behind my desk. I bring my chair out and then they have another chair. It's not exactly beside, but it's like there's nothing between us. Just kind of get them at ease, put them at ease, select a quiet room. Do not allow your staff to interrupt you unless the building's on fire. It's like, so try maybe to go away from your normal office, because sometimes your staff forgets, especially Zoom interviews. If you're doing any Zoom interviewing, just remind them. This is very important. This is not something you're supposed to be interrupting. That's my Zoom. Where'd it go? Oh, there y'all are. There you are. I lost you for a minute. So, good answer. That one was right there for you. Number 10, how can stereotypical thinking of the person conducting an interview affect the interview? I wrote nails in great big letters next to mine. Everybody's hiding their fingers. You gotta know yourself and what affects you.
Right.
You have to try really hard to be objective. Because your stereotypical thoughts, your prejudices are going to interfere with your objectivity. And by prejudices, and we talked at assessment clinic, that just means choice. The things you like versus the things you don't like has nothing to do with race, creed, color, sexual orientation, any of that. Just things you like versus things that drive you crazy.
Right.
So those things you have to set aside, and you have to have a little talk with yourself that says, okay, we need to be objective. Let's see what happens if I can get through that and hire them anyway. That might be just what we need. Good. All right. Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. What does it prohibit? And there is a huge list.
Yeah.
And you don't have to read them all, but kind of give me just a synopsis.
And
Okay.
says to avoid questions about marital status, family's age, appearance, or indirectly solicit info.
And it actually, believe it or not, there's certain arrests you're not supposed to ask about. You just leave that up to HR when they run their little thingy. Here's what I always say, because I can't ask specifically about arrests. We're going to do a background check and a criminal check. Is there anything on there you want to tell me about before we do it? Because I know I can't ask them, but I also know I don't want to be surprised when it comes in. 'Cause that's a waste of my time. So, because we don't do them until after we decide who's getting made an offer. So it slows the whole process down. You'd be surprised. Sometimes they will tell you there's something. Other times they just pretend that you didn't ask that question. So you can ask it without asking it. So remember, you can't ask about arrest, you can't ask about convictions, you can't ask about marital status, you can't ask about living arrangements, you can't ask if they have children. A lot of times what you can ask is, what are your interests? And if they tell you it's 7-year-old soccer, then you just told me the answer. What do you like to do on your off time? If it's, I like to hang out with my blah, blah, my friends and go do this, or I like to hang out with my husband, or I like to go to my, whatever. You can figure a lot without asking questions that are specific to things you can't ask. Don't ask people where they're from. If you do want to know, like, where in Texas did you come from? You better make that really specific. Don't ask them where they're from. That gets into national origin and citizenship and things. So be careful that you just ask, what city did you used to live in or something? Just, if they're new to your area. Pregnancy, I hired somebody one time that was 2.5 months pregnant, did not know it, but that's okay. She ended up being a really good employee. She said, I was afraid to tell you. You're probably right. If you told me, I wouldn't have hired you. I'll be honest, because now my head's thinking, oh God, she's going to be off for months any day now. So I didn't ask, she didn't tell. She got the job and told me day one. Okay, that's fair. Ended up being really good. So just remember, there's certain things you just can't. There's some scripts in this book that I think are pretty interesting to read about, what you can and what you can't. Like I said earlier, people will tell you more than you ever want to know. So if you just kind of sit back and let them go, there's a lot to be said in interviews for silence because they think they're supposed to fill it. So if you just sit there for a minute, you'll be amazed what comes out. Yeah. Like, wow, I was just sitting here for a second, collecting my thoughts. And the next thing I know, because silence is uncomfortable in that situation. So they start talking.
Mhm.
Oh, I didn't give them the right answer. They quit talking. So now I'm gonna tell them something else. It happens, believe me. List unfair pre-employment inquiries. We just talked about most of them. Age, arrest, citizenship, families, all that stuff. Explain the difference between an open-ended and a closed-ended question. Piece of cake. Do you know what a closed-ended question is? That's a closed-ended question. It's a yes or no answer.
Bless you.
Thank you. A closed-ended question is a yes or no answer. An open-ended question would be like, explain to me what you think a closed-ended question is. I don't give you the option of saying yes or no. You have to tell me something. So be real good with asking open-ended questions that give them room to talk. I learned from an attorney because I used to testify a lot when I was a social worker in child abuse cases. And he always said, you answer yes or no unless I ask you to expound. So, because you know that if you don't give them a yes or no question, they're going to talk. So he trained us so hard, you don't say another word other than yes or no unless I ask you to. Because they don't want you talking. Like, don't give people room to come back at you with. So if you want them talking, don't ask them yes or no questions. because you just gave them a yes or no question. How can an interview be ended on a positive professional note? We talked a little bit about this already. What are you going to ask them?
They have any questions?
Good. Another thing that I say is, now that we're almost done, is there something I should have asked you and didn't? Instead of saying, do you have any questions? Because they might not be a question, but they might want to share something with you. They might want to tell you something. So I always say, is there something I should have asked you, but I didn't? And they might tell you what they wanted to tell you. So always give them space at the end to be able to say anything. Anything else you would like to share? And then talk about what happens next. What's the expected timeline? Sometimes they're gonna say to you, how did I do? Or am I at the top? Be honest, but not committed. I don't know yet. I've got to interview this many more people, or I'm done interviewing, but now I have to put my thoughts together. I'm not real sure. You know, be honest, but not committed either way. Unless, of course, they're doing stupid stuff like answering the phone because their kid's in jail. Then you can just tell them they're probably not getting the job. Or they're late to work every day because they've got to take their kids to school first. My issue with that was not that they were late. I would have staff who would come to me, I would hope, and say, we have an issue with scheduling. Can I take a 45-minute lunch? Or can I stay late 15 minutes? Or can we do something so I can take my kids to school? Why would you not do that? But
Right.
that was my issue with that. Not that she had to take her kids to school. I thought there's got to be a way around this, and you didn't bother to ask what that might be. You're just late every day. So kind of just give them a timeline. You know, when you've interviewed, you want a timeline. You want to know, when are you gonna, can you tell me when your final decision should be made? Always, our HR is the worst. I shouldn't say it. They never follow up. I personally have to send emails to people and say, thank you very much for your time. I'm sorry the position has been filled, because they don't do that. And I know people are dying to know. So the people that I interview for sure get a email. It just says, you know, it was nice to meet you. Good luck with your job quest, whatever. Because HR is like, we don't do that anymore. It's like, oh, okay. Well, I haven't that little common courtesy. So, because I would want to know, so I could start looking elsewhere. I have found that people think they did a lot better than they did. So they're sure they got the job, and you're like, I better let them know they did. Or vice versa. Their self-esteem's pretty, they for sure they bombed it and didn't get the job, and they did. So I like to just let everybody know where we stand. Why would a company conduct a second interview?
So we have a second interview to actually just say to them, hey, you have the job. We don't
Okay.
really do a follow-up interview. At that point, we kind of say, yes, we want you, and give them the
Cool.
job.
Okay.
Just
We do a second interview with 2 candidates. That's when we actually start talking court stuff. That's when we talk security. That's when we talk defendants in court. That's when we talk about having to go to Austin for a week for new clerks. That's when we talk about all those things that are going to be required of them. So that they understand, you know, talk about the fact that certification is required, whatever your rules for court specific stuff. That's what we do in the second interview. Just so they can be aware that this, you know, I interviewed somebody in a second interview and said, this requires you to go to Austin for a 32-hour school within the next year. Can you go? And she's like, oh no, I have no one for my children. Okay, but that's a requirement because you can't get certified without it. So, you know, those are the kind of questions we ask. Which was a fair, open, legal question. She's the one that walked into the kid thing. So those kind of security, you have to tell people that you're working with criminals. I mean, they know that it's a court, but you have to say there are times when you may feel a little worried about your safety, and how do you watch your back? You know, what kind of events would make you think maybe we need to call someone? Those kind of things. You don't want somebody who's going to call some security every time somebody cusses at them. But you don't want somebody who's oblivious to their back, who's not, who walks around openly without having to worry about security. That's the kind of things we do in second interview. After my boss and my senior do them, I get in and start that nitty gritty stuff. What are you gonna do if somebody calls you everything they can think of and starts pounding on the glass? You better tell me you're gonna call an officer.
Yeah.
Well, I can calm them down. I'm really good at calming people down. It's like,
Mm.
you might think it's just a traffic ticket, but every murderer that sat in that jail over there, we knew that person. Guarantee we knew that person at one time. They put this big picture, they sent a picture email to everybody on the staff of the whole city because this guy was disrupting council meetings and he threatened them and was gonna kill everybody. And they put it up and I texted him, I emailed real fast and replied and said, would you like to know his name and address? And they were like, how do you know this guy? It's like, he's in here all the time. They were like, oh my God. It's like, so I try to tell people when I first bring them on, the little criminals might be big criminals too. So you might want to kind of watch out a little bit. Like unfortunately, the kid that murdered his two friends here in Friendswood last month. I've seen that kid quite a few times. So that's the things I talk about in second interview, because I want to make sure, one, they know what they're getting into, and two, they can handle it. Yeah, we have fun. Some crazy people in the court world. On both sides of the window. What are some warning signs of job-related problems? Now we're going from hiring to firing, y'all. Not my favorite. You go chart on page 67.
I put in turns work. Oh man, turns work in late, missed deadlines, conflict with coworkers, produces less late, absent, long breaks, seems isolated or unhappy, doesn't volunteer, and is not included by other coworkers.
Perfect, perfect. There are signs, you start catching them. They may be a temporary thing. Somebody may be going through something at their personal life, but you should feel enough to say, is it something here that we can help you with? I am real in tune. There's only 4 of them, so I am really in tune to their moods. So it doesn't take anything for me to call somebody and say, what's going on? Something I can help you fix, or is it something you don't want to tell me? That's fine, but what can I do to help you? Because it affects everyone. Let's be honest, it becomes painful for everybody. When you can tell somebody's tired of their job and they want out, I think as the supervisor, it's your duty to explain to them that, yes, that's noticeable. We either have to make some changes or you have to make a change in employment. That's what I call my come to Jesus meetings. So it's like, God, you can't make everyone out there miserable. I know you might have went through a divorce. Most of us did. I know that you might have this going on. You have elderly parents or whatever. This is not bragging, I promise. I'm so easy with helping you with whatever that is. We all, if you've got something and we can help you with it, if we don't know what it is, we can't help you. So if you see these signs, I'm charging you to take them in and figure out where in there you can help. If they're just being a jerk, and you just, the frequent absence, the first sign. The first sign is somebody who calls in sick a lot. And you gotta wonder if they're sick. You don't know. I don't ask. I didn't used to allow this. Now they can text me to call in sick because I don't want to set them up to lie to me. I know this sounds horrible, but a lot of times they're not telling the truth and I really don't need anybody to fake cough on the phone. So now they can text. Or that one day. And I just say, okay, hope you feel better tomorrow. Because I do not ever want to set anybody up to have to lie to me. Please just, and I think we do that when we make them tell us what's wrong with them. I made that mistake once. And I got more information than I ever wanted because this person told me they had to go to the health department and give them a list because they had something. I said, a list? That's all I could think of. You have to give them a list? And It was the wrong answer. I shouldn't, and so now I don't ask it all. I don't want to know. Don't tell me. And so then I had this older woman who didn't feel well and she called in and she goes to HR and complains because I'm not concerned about what's wrong with her. I said, I can't win one way or the other. If I ask, they don't tell me. If I don't ask, then they think I don't care. So it's always like, I'm sorry that you don't feel well. See you tomorrow. Hope to see you tomorrow. I'm not asking ever again. I got burnt. It's like, oh, because I can't forget that when they come back to work. And ever could forget it. I still can't forget it. And it was 15 years ago. God, I can't ever forget that. So those are the kind of reasons I don't ask. I want to know. Plus, it really is not my business. And I don't want to step on anybody's hip or toes by asking those kind of questions. A lot of times, especially people who have kids, they might technically be sick. But you know, if their kids got something going on at school they don't want to tell you about, or like bad, or things they have to deal with, or I have one single mom who has a horrendous relationship with the kid's dad. And I know some days you just can't deal with it. You just can't. So I just let them text me and say, I'm not coming in today. Then I say, I hope to see you tomorrow. They don't abuse it because people will say, oh my God, you do that. They must call in sick a lot. You would be major surprised. They hardly ever. I think because they know they can, they don't. Like they don't abuse, which is a surprise to me at first, but now it's like they don't bother to abuse it because everybody's like, if you let them text, they'll call in sick all the time. They don't. Okay. Where are we? Oh, job related problems. We did that one. Anybody else tell me any signs they know that you can almost tell somebody's like wants out?
They do a lot of surfing the internet. We've had people who surf the internet when they're ready to leave and just blow off their duties.
I saw somebody one time surfing and she was looking at jobs. And I said, that's a really good idea because I think you're going to need to find another one. And she just looked at me and went, oh. I was I'm telling you, I'm stupid. They do. They call in, they're late. They're just not there. They don't interact with other people the way they used to. Just my stance, and I will tell them that, I will tell you that, I tell everybody, every staff meeting, life is too short to be here if you don't want to be. There's jobs. I would work at Walmart first before I'd suffer through it if I hated it. I'm just not gonna. It's too important because it bleeds through not only to your coworkers, but to the defendants. One of the signs that they can't put here because it's not a court book is when you see people starting to get into it with defendants. It's like, okay, they're burned out. They've had enough. They can no longer just let that stuff go. Because we let a lot of stuff go. Whatever. You don't even know my mama. You can call her whatever you want. And they can't let it go anymore. And they have an answer. It's like, okay. So as long as you're aware and you can kind of bring it down, tie it back in, you should be okay. If problems cannot be resolved informally, when a manager schedules a meeting with employee, how should the meeting be conducted? Page 70.
So I have begin with a specific description of what you feel that the problem is. Permit the employee to explain himself or herself on what they feel, what their perspective is, and follow up, like discuss the problem at hand, and then follow periodically monitoring the employees' efforts.
Perfect. And I always send an email after a counseling session, coaching, whatever you want to call it. You know, discipline session. This is what we discussed. This is what we're gonna do, and this is how often I'm gonna check in with you. Just so we keep on the same track. They can
I
print
had
it.
a man,
Mhm.
I had a manager that actually told me that one of the things or skills that she used was kind of the crap sandwich. Start off with something great, praise them in a way, and then talk about what the problem is that you're seeing, and set those goals for them to come back and, And ended on a positive note again,
good.
don't always be so negative about everything that is wrong in the situation. Try to pull out a positive so they don't feel like they're just being beat up in that meeting.
I agree.
'Cause it's kind of intimidating to go into a meeting like that with your
On
manager.
both sides.
Yeah,
I hate to
absolutely.
admit, I don't like it
Mhm.
either.
I don't either.
I always end with, I think we can do this. We got this. Don't worry about it. Yeah, we got it. We can do this. If we can follow this plan, you'll be fine.
Mhm.
And I honestly, I'm an I statement person. It's like, I'll do whatever I can to help you, but I'm going nuts here trying to figure out what the problem is. So I need some help. Make sure you point some of it at you. If somebody's having a little bit of a problem, it's not all them. It could be partially the way that you're handling them.
Mhm.
Or you're not noticing something or whatever. It's a real awful, I hate fire. Has anybody ever fired anyone?
Yes,
It's awful.
it's awful.
I have to go home afterwards. I do. It's like, I gotta do it in the afternoon or I'm leaving in the morning because I can't. Because I feel horrible. I just affected that whole person's life. I mean, they did, as they say, they fired themselves. But you realize that you just made a big change in somebody's whole life. It's like, that's not a little thing to go into. So make sure if you do these steps ahead of time, people always love to fire people. I've never met anyone that loves to fire people.
Mhm.
Never gonna. So do these steps, sit down, and I feel much better when I think I've tried every single thing I can. And I've given every single resource I knew how to give and you just wouldn't accept it. And I can be a little rested. You can't lie to me though. That's why you're gonna get fired.
Yeah.
That one gets me crazy. If I give you all the resources and all the skills and you just continue to not tell the truth, I'm done. When conducting a counseling or disciplinary interview or session, what types of words should a supervisor avoid?
Always, never, and inevitably.
Mhm.
No always, no never. You always do this wrong. No, they don't. If they do, did you train them? I'm a big one for looking at training when somebody messes up. If it's a training mistake, it's like, this is on me. I did not train you correct, or not me. I don't train anymore, but this is on me because whoever I gave you as a trainee didn't understand what I was telling them that you needed. I'll take it first. First time I'll take it. After that, I'm not taking it. So always, never, inevitably, I know you're gonna do this, inevitably, I hate that word. That means I know it's gonna happen. No, you don't. So, yeah, try to be positive, as Suzanne said, throw some positive in there. Are you trying to make them miserable? No, that is not the goal. And do you want them to leave? I'll be honest, there's a difference if you really want them to leave or if you want to save them. And we're talking right now at very early disciplinary actions where you think you might still want to save them. My problem with wanting to save somebody, if I hired them, I feel like I goofed up if I can't save them. So you don't want to get rid of somebody you hired because that means you made a hiring mistake without trying to get them through it. So, why is it important for supervisors to explain the objective of a disciplinary meeting and how the objectives are the objectives used during the meeting? I got them. I got it. It's right under the absolute never always on 71. And you've heard this before, every one of you, you've got to keep your meetings behavior oriented, not personality oriented, not personal. You got to relate them to your goals and you got to relate them to the tasks. You got to keep your discussions aligned to the tasks. You can't attack someone personally, even if their behavior is staff oriented or how they're getting along with other staff members, it's still not personal. You can still align it to the behavior. When you say this to Mary feels like this. It's not that you're a shit and you shouldn't yell at Mary. Matter, oh, I'm being recorded and I just said the S word. But anyway, you get the gist. It's not personal. Sorry. Anyway. What can a supervisor do during a disciplinary meeting to help an emotional employee to get control of their emotions? This is a very fun one.
This is kind of trivial, but I find that it's helped several employees when I've said, nobody's gonna die over this.
That does help.
It's not that big of a deal, but it's important, you know,
Yes.
but it's not, nobody's gonna die. It's not that
Say
critical.
that every time I proctor a test. This is not life or death. I promise. Worst thing that can happen is you come back next time. Not a big deal. But yeah, I've had one person get totally hysterical, start throwing things. I mean, the bailiff had to come in. Yeah, it was bad. And then I've had other people just bawl. It's just, they just cry. You're like, oh my God, I can't handle this. One, you have to separate the manipulation. Some people can cry on a dime. And you can see it happening. It's like, that's not gonna work. Go ahead. Do you need tissues? That's all you're getting from me at this point is a box of tissues. Because some people can turn it on and off. And are they using it to manipulate you and make you feel bad? So you have to separate the theatrics from the reality. Is this just a show? Or are they, I would cry if I got fired, let's be honest. I would cry. But the big management state, nobody should ever get fired as a surprise. Should never be a surprise. A termination interview should never be a surprise. Unless you got caught doing something immediately that requires termination, like stealing or something, but it should never be a surprise. And that shouldn't be a surprise either. You're not supposed to steal. So we had a person here who actually didn't steal at work, but she got arrested at work nicely. And they took her to the police department to arrest her. I didn't hire her. She was an inherent, but for fraud and theft in her personal life. And so we suspended her while they did the investigation. And when we brought her back in to fire her, she was in shock. It's like, why are you shocked? I thought you'd let me come back. It's like, why? I mean, she was suspended for like 2 months while they did the investigation with pay. And then she was shocked when she got fired. I thought, you had 2 months to look for another job. And the first thing that I'd done. But really wasn't shocked. So you got to watch, you're in control of that meeting. That's your meeting. Keep it short. That is not the time for them to talk about what they can do to stay. That time is gone. They had those opportunities numerous times. And they will ask you, what can I do? What can I do? Those days, very short. Termination meeting should last about 5 minutes. Because by then your mind's made up. And they should know your mind's made up. And it's not room for conversation at that point. You had those meetings where it was room for conversation. You had those disciplinary meetings all the way up. Termination meetings are not conversations. They're like, well, unfortunately. It's usually a dead giveaway because I would suggest you get somebody from HR in there with you. So if you walk, my staff used to get real freaked when the HR director would come over. Like, no, we're good. No one's fired. It's promised. He's just stepping by. Well, when I first got over here to Friendswood, I had some inherited staff. None of them are any longer here. And there were some people who had to leave and the HR director was here a few times. So then everybody got real nervous. It's like, why is he here? I don't know. I think he's just in the building. They would get scared. Okay, here's one that's not firing, but kind of on Susan's point. During a disciplinary meeting, how can a supervisor stress the positive to help the situation becoming too negative? Talk about the contributions they made. The thing you have to be careful of is don't be too positive, because then they're like, then what am I here for? Why am I in here? You just told me how wonderful I was. So you got to kind of even it out, get to the point, but always end with, I think we got this. These are your contributions. This is why you're here. And we need you to bring those good things back that used to be here. We missed them. Unless it's your like 6 months and you never brought any good things. That's a different kind of termination. When asking an employee for feedback during a disciplinary meeting, how should the supervisor conduct that part of the meeting? Page 72. allow a person to respond. This is a disciplinary, not a termination. Allow a person to respond and just let them talk. A lot of times they're gonna say things you don't agree with. Try to blame other people, but just let them get it out. And at the end, you're gonna have a point of, well, this is what I need you to do. No matter what, and who they say other things about, you get down to the wire at the end and go, these are the things we need to do. They're gonna blame other people, they're mad, and then you're gonna get that, well, Jennifer did that, she's not getting in trouble. We're not talking about Jennifer right now. We're dealing with your behavior. You don't know what Jennifer and I talk about. Let's go on. You're gonna get a lot of that with a staff that's been around together. Well, she did it. How come I'm in trouble for doing it when they did it, or whatever? You get whatever you'll get. You'll get. People are defensive. That's just human nature. I mean, I've never been fired, but I bet I'm gonna have my say if I do. I'm gonna tell you why why it's not just my fault. No, honestly, if I need fired, I'd quit, but it's just me. I always think, you know, the part where they tell you that clerks can't be sanctioned by the Judicial Commission, but you can get your judge sanctioned. Every time I hear that, I think, I would never show my face again. They wouldn't have to fire me. I'd be too embarrassed to go back to work. Like, I quit. So, because you could get fired. I can't get sanctioned by the commission, but if I got my judge sanctioned, I'd have to leave. After disciplinary meeting, how is an action plan monitored? Talked about this earlier. Put it in writing. I email. So I have proof. And then I have a check date. We have a checkpoint date. Don't forget those. Put them in your calendar immediately. That's on the supervisor. That's on you, the immediate supervisor. If you write a plan and you have to have them do it, you better check in when you said you were gonna, or you totally just wiped out everything you did. If you didn't keep your end of the bargain. Hi, Susan. You gotta go, Suzanne. So you gotta keep your end of the bargain. If you don't, I have to put my calendar because I will forget. I'll have to put, okay, check in with so-and-so on the POP or whatever they call it, performance and PIP, performance improvement plan, PIP. So make sure you keep your end of the bargain. This is, what should a supervisor do at the end of a disciplinary meeting? And if you don't know what it says in the book, just tell me what you think you should do.
Well, thank the employee for their time and, I mean, just be still polite and move forward.
Yeah, agreed. Thank them for their time, saying, hey, you gonna work with me on this? Kind of elicit their support and their buy-in. And just tell them, I think, you know, be as positive as you can. We got this. Who here has never had trouble at work? I mean, not trouble, but every one of us is screwed up. I mean, it's just the way it is. None of us is not screwed up at the job at least once. We might not have got caught, or we might have fixed it ourselves, or whatever, but it's very uncomfortable. But it's doable. I mean, you just gotta get them to buy in that they want to get better. Don't expect them to be pleasant with you for a day or two. It's okay. If they don't want to talk to anybody, it's okay. It's not that they failed the plan immediately when they walk out there and start acting like a toot. Just that they gotta like assimilate all this into their being and maybe aren't want to talk to anybody for a couple days. If at all possible, I do this all the time because I know I call people into my office all the time. Just so that when I call you into my office, everybody else doesn't know you're being disciplined. So sometimes I'll say, Jennifer, can I see you a minute? And they get freaked. They used to get freaked. They don't freak anymore. And it's usually nothing. Because I don't want the, I see you for a minute, for everybody in the office to go, ooh, they're in trouble. So sometimes I just call them in to tell them their vacation's approved. Or that I'm buying Starbucks or something. It's because I don't want the whole place to be out there going, uh-oh, she got called in the office, like the principal's office. They don't never know when I'm gonna call them in for something. Or, hey, would you open the safe? I don't feel like getting on my chair. I've done that, but whatever. Just don't let that only time you ever talk to them is when they're in trouble, is kind of the moral of that story. And if I can avoid other people finding out, I like to do it when like, maybe early in the morning or other people are noticing, or lunch or something where the whole world's not going, that person just got a discipline meeting. One, it's none of their business. And two, it makes the other person very uncomfortable when they have to go back on the floor. So if they did try, or if they need to regain composure, tell them to go take a break. Don't expect them to go right back to the window or right back in the middle of the gallery if you just had a disciplinary meeting. I'm gonna give you 15 minutes. Why don't you go have a cup of coffee or something? To go walk around the building. It's nice out or something. So that they know it's okay with you if they don't just pop right back out there and start working. Because you just told them they had work to do. And you might have scared them into thinking it's immediate, but it's okay to give them. And I don't expect them to talk to me at all the next day. They usually won't. That's okay. I don't want to talk to them either. We just talked. I didn't even give them time to fix it, so. A lot of this, does this make common sense to y'all? Is this like normal? This is what a human being would do? That's how the questions on this section are. A lot of it's normal. Human beings would do this because like we're human beings. Before considering terminating employee, what issues and information should a supervisor consider? There is an appendix B that has all kinds of pre-termination questions. I don't know if I've ever asked any of them, but probably good. to know. Disciplining without tears. That's a cool. I'm looking for it. It's appendix B, but anyway, there is a whole thing in there of reasons and things that you have to consider before terminating somebody. It's not their personal life. It's not the fact that they have kids and they can't be unemployed. None of those things are we needing to get into. Though in your head, and let me tell you this as supervisors, because you're all in level 3, so if you're not supervising, you want to be, it's rough to not consider those things. It's like, shoot, if I fire her, kids are on her insurance and she's a single mom, and oh my God, what are we gonna do? I can't. You have to let that go. That is rough. That is so rough. So it's very important that you know those things. Here it is. Here are all those questions. To make sure that you try real hard. I mean, your job is job one. The business of the city is job one. And I tell them that sometimes when we're having come to these meetings. I know that you're going to think I'm being hard, but my job is to make sure the city's business gets done. Though I like you, I'm glad you're here. I love this team. They depend on me from over at City Hall to make sure things get done over here. So my job is job one. I'm be all kinds of buds, but at times I gotta say, this is it. Because I'm not doing my job if you're not doing your job. And sometimes you have to remind them of that. You're not just being hard on them. You're not just being picky. You're doing your job, asking them to do their job. And it's rough at times because like I said, our departments are fairly cohesive and they're fairly close and you don't want to be the bad guy, but sometimes you got to put them big girl panties on and just say, sorry, I'm not going down for you. And let's be honest, if I don't take care of what you're doing wrong, they're going to take care of me and I don't want to go. You know, sometimes you got to be that blunt. I started here and there was a person that had worked here that I knew her because she's a court clerk and we did not get along at all. So I knew when I got this job that she'd been here for like 20 years and she was going to give me a hellaciously hard time. And that's exactly the conversation I had with her. I'm going to do my job and you're not going to like it. She actually retired about 2 weeks after I started. Because I told her when she said something and I said, well, needs to leave and I just got here. And so she went and retired. Because you have to remind them sometimes that you're doing your job. I don't play hardball a lot, but if I have to, remember that stinks. But and here's the termination thing. The first thing, what do I hope to accomplish as the result of this meeting? What exactly do I want this employee to do differently? Know that going into the meeting, or they're going to ask, what do you want me to do? Well, I don't really know. I haven't thought about it. I just don't want you to do what you're doing. No, you really need to know what you want them to do. What's an agreement I hope we can reach? Think of something realistic, small steps. You can't make them do the whole thing over at one point. You know, I have somebody who's notorious about not leaving comments in Tyler. Notorious, that drives me crazy. Those little steps at a time. It's like, all right, today, every time you pick up the phone, open that name and just put defendant call. That's totally not necessary, but I needed her to get ready to open comments every day, all day long. So she did that for a while, and she realized, okay, can I stop putting defendant called if I make sure all my other comments? Yes. If you make pertinent comments, you can quit writing them every time somebody calls. So just little steps. It was like, okay, what can I help her do that's gonna make this problem go away? She's still real bad about it. She's not as bad as she used to. And she tells me I'm just hyper about it, but that's how I feel about comments. I like us all to be on the same page. And if we don't have comments, we can't be on the same page. And they start clerk shopping, call 3 or 4 times to get a different answer. I hate that. What kind of record should a supervisor keep to protect yourself from lawsuits? It's on page-
You must keep records on all employees. Otherwise, you may be faced with a lawsuit that says you are discriminating.
Yes.
Keep records of meetings with employee and causes for the dismissal decision.
I follow up with emails on every counseling session. I also have notes in my personal computer, and not my personal, my work computer, and everybody has a file. And I just make it, part of it is because I was a therapist and I'm used to making notes after meetings. So I have little like therapy notes that say, we talked about this, good or bad. We talked about this went down, this is what we're gonna do. I pretty much keep therapy notes, but they're not therapy notes, but the same style. This is what the problem was. This is what we talked about. This is what we decided we were gonna do. On every single time. And then I email them for our conversation. Sometimes it's a more formal email, consider this to be a written reprimand, but sometimes it's just for our conversation. This is what we hope to accomplish in the next 2 weeks. I'll see you on February 13th at 2:00. See where we're at. Just those guys. Make sure you keep notes, but also make sure you tell them what the plan was. Remind them, because they're not taking notes. You realize when you're sitting in a disciplinary meeting, they haven't heard a word you said after you're in trouble. That's all they heard. Now, how many times have you yelled at your kids to do something and all they remember is you yelled at them? And they'll tell you 10 years later about the day you yelled at them when they're adults. Remember that time you yelled at me? Which time? So to remember, their memory is probably not the same as yours because they were under a stressful situation and don't even remember what the plan is. So I always followed up with an email. When is the best time for an exit interview? I have some qualms with exit interviews. The book says within 3 days. I think that's a test question. I can't remember, but it sounds like one. I don't like exit interviews. I don't think they're necessary. You're in terminations. It's okay with me if you went and got another job, and you nicely quit, but you're asking somebody who hates everybody to tell you what they think. Like, well, that's dumb. I have been totally slammed. Only twice. People I've had to terminate are people that have quit because like they didn't have a whole lot of choice. But exit interviews make no sense to me. But they do, some people do. They should be done within 3 days. And there's the purpose of exit interviews is to ask what the issues were, what maybe a supervisor could have done differently, what you thought about the city in general. What I don't like here is they hold up your last paycheck if you don't do one. And I think you should have the right to decide you don't want. I think you should have the right to say no, thank you. But I'm not HR, so. Has anybody ever done an exit interview or had one done for somebody that left your employee? know why some places think.
We had somebody leave and in their resignation letter, the same day they quit in the afternoon by email, they put their exit interview, basically.
Oh my goodness.
Unsolicited, but
Yeah.
obviously it was very critical, but
Well, I'm
We
sure
had
across the
one,
board,
not in this department, but we
not
had
very.
one who did an email with their exit interview and sent it to the entire city.
Mm.
That is so unprofessional. That is so unprofessional.
Mhm.
I mean, you're not gonna get a good reference anyway, but why would you do that?
Yeah. And now a lot of the exit interview questions that our city kind of beats them to the punch because we do employee surveys. And so a
Mhm,
lot of
good.
those questions are in there so they can kind of get
Yeah,
ahead of it instead of
Good.
it being a problem on the end.
we do those too, which I don't mind those at all, but don't exit interview somebody I fired. Gonna tell me how hateful I am. It's like, no, that's just wrong. I had one exit interview from someone that got fired that admitted it was her own fault and thanked me for giving her chances. It's like, wow, that's a mature person.
Mhm.
Mhm.
It's like, it's HR, this is the nicest firing interview we've ever done. It's like, that was really sweet. I did give her a lot of chances. Oh, she just couldn't do the job, which is okay. They ask how better can we assure talents and company, how employees feel about the boss? Stupid question. What would employee have done if he was the supervisor? That's my favorite exit interview question. That is the worst question of all time. What would you done if you were a boss? Well, I wouldn't have fired myself. Why do you ask that? It's like, wow. There's a lot to be said for just knowing your people. I have not had to terminate anybody in like, since the person who stole, which was 10 years ago, 9 years ago, anybody.
Good.
I know, I have, and I can say this proudly, we just thought about this the other day. I have never fired anyone I hired. They've all been inherits that were there when I got somewhere. It's just different personality styles. My hiring style must have been different than the other person's because that person just didn't work. I'm not probably easy to work with unless you do your job. Then I'm real easy, I think. We could do an interview and ask my staff, but I give you mile, mile and mile, if you're trying. If you're just trying, and if you can't do a certain thing, I'll try you somewhere else until we find a fit for you. But if you won't even give me the benefit of the doubt or try, or I don't like gossips. That's the easiest way to get fired from me is start trouble in my office. Have time for drama. The drama queens have to go real quick. You gotta find a better job, because I'm not into drama. I'm not a theater kind of person, so you need to leave. Maybe like Hollywood, I don't know, somewhere where they appreciate your skills, but I don't like them. We have to be here all day, every day. And when people start titch on each other, we had a staff when I first got here, you would have thought they were best friends till one left for lunch, then the others would start. And I was like, I thought that was your friend. She was your friend when she was in this room? What happened? Oh, they would just start, and then another one would go to lunch and would start all over. It was like, oh my God, I'm gonna kill all of you. They're all gone, which is good. We got a great crew right now. Anybody have any questions, comments, concerns? This, I swear to God, this is the easiest. How many questions? 18 points you're gonna get. Swear to God. It is. There's not one question on this part of the test I think is hard. So you got free 18 points. You just read this book and use your brain.
Can you tell us how many questions are on the test?
About altogether, all 3 parts.
Yeah.
There's about 126 on each part, so 370 to 400. This
Okay.
book has 8. Some books have more, some books have less.